Okay, good evening. Today is Tuesday, July 17th, and this is the Hanson Board of Selectmen meeting. And we'll be going into executive session first to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of a real property if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of a public body, and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body and the chair so declares. Roller Coaster Road and Lakeside Road. I'm looking for a motion to go in an executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Roll call.
Aye.
Yes.
I'm in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
We're now in executive session. Okay, good evening. This is the opening of the Hanson Board of Selectmen's meeting. Today is Tuesday, July 17th, and this meeting is being videotaped by Whitman Hanson Community Cable, Access Cable. So, call to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
My chair, I'm sorry.
Good evening, Hanson. This is this week's announcement. Town Clerk's Office would like to remind dog owners that it's time to license your dogs. All dogs must be licensed by September 30th. Volunteers are needed on the following committees: the 200th Anniversary, Capital Improvement, Community Preservation Commission, Disabilities, Economic Development, Elderly Affairs, Energy, Finance, Memorial Day Patriot Observance, Memorial Day Field Trustees, Recreation Commission, School Repair and Zoning, Board Alternate. Applications for appointment and information on the committees is available at the town website. Upcoming meeting, the Selectmen's Meeting, Tuesday, July 24th at 7 p.m., the 200th Anniversary on Thursday, July 26th at 7 p.m., and Selectmen's Meeting, Tuesday, August 14th. And then also, the Water Department would like to announce that a leak detection company, Water and Waste Pipe Testing, Inc., will be in town for the next few weeks testing for water leaks. All of their vehicles are clearly marked.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Okay, appointments. We got an appointment for Laura Brown for special counsel.
And are we just moving that you are empowered to execute this on
Yeah,
our behalf?
exactly. It just, as we're going forward with these auctions, these title-taking auctions, it just makes a lot of sense to have her actually appointed as special counsel, as well as execute this two-page contract. All the terms are exactly the same as the terms that she conducted the auction.
So she's
So
worked
this
for
is
us
just,
before, and she's done a great job,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this just means that we don't have to vote on this every time prospectively. Okay, I move that we authorize Mike to enter into this legal retainer agreement between Laura Anastasia Brown and the town of Hanson.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded.
and to appoint her as special counsel.
And to appoint her as special counsel.
Any questions? All those in favor? 5-0, Mary.
Who seconded that?
That's all I needed.
Okay, next, new business, Selectmen's Workshop with Town Council. So, I've been on the board for 3.5 years. When I first got on the board, other than the 3 months of meetings that I attended, I didn't know all the responsibilities or roles of a selectman. So for the first 3 months, I think I felt a little bit lost, and I sat down on the end, so I was close to the town administrator, so I could ask questions and stuff. So after having a discussion with Kate about this, Kate suggested, where we have 2 new selectmen, that we do a workshop. She said, hey, why don't I put together just some, basic stuff? So I thought that was a cool idea. I apologize, I set it up on our night off, but reading through the stuff that she sent over, I thought it was good. So Kate's here to, to go over this.
I love it, and I also think those of us who've been doing it for a while could use refreshers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't think it would be a bad thing for us to do this annually, have a little refresher training.
Yeah, no, I'm fine
You
with
know?
that. I do ask that we just wait and ask questions at the end, because I don't want to ask questions and then have her cover it, in a different section. So just write down your questions and then we can ask her questions. So, Kate, take it away.
Okay, so thank you for having me. And I have a PowerPoint that I put together, and my computer wasn't able to sync up with this screen. So everyone has a hard copy, I believe, and we can just begin. So essentially, I outlined a bunch of different topics that we can talk about and then maybe expound upon in a question and answer session at the end. But essentially, it's that, how to define your roles and responsibility along with the roles of others in the town, where that derives from. The fact that then the board is the policy maker for the town. They also serve in a quasi-judicial capacity. You're the appointing authority. Conversely, the TA, the town administrator, Mike, is the policy enforcer. So he takes what you do and ensures that it's completed. Then I talk about how the board acts as a body. You're not individually empowered to do things. The intersection of these roles, how to be an effective selectman, the role of the chair, and then a quick blurb on the open meeting law, which could take hours, but I'm just going to summarize a few key points. So we'll go from there. Essentially, the roles and responsibilities for boards of selectmen, town administrators are defined by your charter, by bylaws, by special acts. Hanson has a particular act for the town administrator to create that role. And it differs for every town. So you have to look at your own bylaws to figure out where these roles are defined. You, as the Board of Selectmen, along with the town administrator, are the executive branch. Obviously, town meeting is the legislative body, but you are the executive branch. What happens is the board creates the policy and Mike implements the policy. So you have a really important function in that you can see where the town has been, where it is now, and where you envision it to be in the future. So it's a really important role. So again, you're the policy maker. You steer the ship. So how do you steer the ship? You create the warrants. So the only article that needs to be on a warrant that's outside of your authority is those that are petitioned by residents. So otherwise, it's up to you to determine whether or not you want legislative changes approved by the legislative body, what budgetary measures you want pushed. All of that's in your control. So you're really shaping the community. You enact certain rules and regulations. Some of the ones that Hanson enacts, the Board of Selectmen, involve the Recreation Commission. You're the Personnel Board. You manage street and highways. You also oversee litigation. You oversee us. You, with Mike's help, approve litigation settlements. So he may speak with us, make a recommendation to you, and you decide whether or not you want to settle on those terms. You approve the collective bargaining agreement. So whereas Mike will coordinate with the unions, he'll negotiate with the unions, you're the one who gives him the direction as to what the settling point should be and what measures you want changed, what you want implemented in the collective bargaining agreements. Similarly, you negotiate the employment contracts. You negotiated Mike's employment contracts. You approve the chief's employment contracts. You expend gifts and grants that are given to the town. So if you have a generous donor, he or she may offer to give a certain amount of money to the town for a certain purpose, and you're the body that actually writes the checks. You approve the budget. It's prepared by Mike, but you approve it. You meet with him, you make recommendations, but ultimately you're the one who signs off on the budget. So it's, again, a big responsibility. Now, the board as a quasi-judicial body includes the initial process of approving different licensures. So you have all oversight over your alcohol licenses. Recently, you took over licensing, you're the special permit granting authority for marijuana establishments. So in that way, you can decide whether or not certain entities or establishments should be cited in a particular area. If they're under the alcohol statute, they have sufficient character to be able to effectively manage an operation. So it gives you a lot of authority to govern the business practices within the town. Same with used car licenses. You know, you have to balance the interest between the neighbors versus the business interests of the town and the economic development of the town. So these are all the ways. You have junkyard licenses, parade permits, yard sale permits. All of those things are under your jurisdiction. Now, you also, in the same judicial, quasi-judicial capacity, have an appellate body oversight. So grievances, which may not be resolved by the town administrator, may come before you for a hearing. And these are critical, right? You have due process rights that you have to think about. You have to ensure that people have access to the board. So it's an important thing. Similarly, when certain registrations are denied, you have the right to hear an appeal from the applicant as to why he or she should be entitled to work within Hanson. So essentially, you're the judge, jury, and executioner as the Board of Selectmen. So it's heavy responsibility. In addition, you have appointment authority, right? You appoint the major department heads. You appoint Mike based on certain qualifications. You appoint the treasurer, the accountant, the building commissioner. So that allows you to select who is the most qualified for these positions. This is probably the biggest area where boards and staff collide, because although you have appointment power, you have decided that Mike is the person who manages operations. So you're not supervising these folks, you're not directing these folks, you're simply appointing them for their qualifications and then assuming they're doing a good job based on Mike's reports, and he's the one who supervises. Let's see. Additionally, you appoint boards and commissions. You've got the zoning board, capital improvement committee, bylaw committee. So you decide the folks who are creating policy along with you, you decide who would be appropriate to serve on those boards and essentially push forward your agendas through those bodies to the extent they can. So now we come to the role of the town administrator. The town administrator is actually a pretty strong town administrator in Hanson, and that's pursuant to the Special Act of 2006. Essentially, he is the director of personnel. He supervises all the employees. He triages all of the town problems and decides how to expend the resources of the town on particular problems. So while he'll consult with the board, report to the board will make known to Mike where they feel he is deficient or missing a piece of information or what have you. Mike is the one who's in charge. He doesn't set the policy, that's a board function, but he implements the policy. He is the person who deals with grievances. He's the person who deals with complaints of employees about their supervisor or their job duties or anything else. He manages public complaints. So there are many, probably Mike will tell you, hundreds of public complaints that come in on a routine basis. And he determines who's the best person to deal with that complaint, how it should be dealt with, how it should be prioritized. He does the employee evaluation. So if someone isn't performing, despite being directed to do so, he's going to evaluate them and make recommendations to you folks if they should be removed. But it's Mike who really is the eyes and ears of the town and is on the ground floor managing these problems. So, in addition, Mike is the chief procurement officer. He's dealing with all contract negotiations with outside vendors within the confines of the town meeting appropriations. And he's just ensuring that everything runs smoothly and efficiently within the town. Now, the board as a public body, first of all, the board as a body, this is another area which is oftentimes difficult for selectmen. Your authority is not as an individual person. Your authority is limited to the board's actions. You can't unilaterally make any decisions, make any decisions, make any directions without board approval. So the practical difficulty is most commonly seen is when you get a complaint from a member of the public. What do? I'm a selectman. I'm elected to serve these folks, and I want to respond. I want to make sure that they're heard. But what you have to do is direct those complaints to Mike to appropriately disseminate the information, ensure that there's compliance, ensure that there's appropriate reaction. So it's difficult to say to someone when they approach you with a problem, not to say, I'm taking care of this today and I'm going to speak to so-and-so directly and ensure it's done. If it's something of sufficient severity that requires action by the selectmen, it needs to be on an agenda for the board to react to collectively. So what does that mean? It means that you have to be effective in your position as a selectman. So how do you do that? You have to come to the meetings prepared. How do you prepare yourself? First of all, easy, you attend the meetings. That's never a problem here in Hanson. Everyone attends. But you have to make sure that you're armed and equipped with accurate information and sufficient information so that you can make a good decision. Mike will provide you with a whole ton of materials that you get on your iPad there. And if you need more, you can't be afraid to ask for an explanation, either through Mike, or Mike may direct you to someone with more specific knowledge. He may say, you know what, talk to the treasurer on that one because it's something so technical that maybe I don't have the expertise. And he may direct you to speak to someone before the meeting, after the meeting, however it plays out. But you want to make sure you're equipped with information so that you make a good decision. And the decision should be smart, informed. Now, that's how the roles intersect. Again, Mike is dealing with the day-to-day management of the town, whereas you're setting policy. He is required and should apprise you of matters of major public concern. If he's getting a complaint on a day-to-day basis on a particular issue, he may bring it to you for some direction. And I think Mike is pretty well versed and comfortable in what he should and should not bring to you. He knows when something's a hot button issue. But you can also, if you're hearing things on the street, he may not be aware of it, and you approach him and ask him that this needs to be discussed and fully vetted before the board. Oops, I jumped ahead. And then we have the important role of the chair. The chair is the person who ultimately controls the meeting. So he sets the agenda with Mike. Mike prepares the agenda in conjunction with the chair. But he sets the time and place of the meetings, which is pretty routine here in Hanson, so it's no big deal. But the most critical role of the chair is running the meeting to make sure things are moving forward quickly, but yet things are fully discussed too. Under the open meeting law, the chair doesn't need to allow public participation. They're required to be able to sit here and listen and to hear what's motivating you in any decision you're making, so your deliberations, but they're not necessarily required to participate or can demand participating. Now, sometimes it's important to hear from the public, and the chair knows when those moments are, because it could be a matter of a concern on a particular neighborhood who has maybe unique knowledge. But sometimes the discussions become unproductive, and you can shut down discussion to move things along, to make sure people are on topic. Now, cooperation among board members is also critical, and the chair can ensure that that's happening. So are you letting your fellow board members speak? The chair ensures that happens. And it's important that the chair be given due deference. It doesn't have to be overly formalistic. I make a question through the chair or something like that. Some boards do it that way, but it doesn't need to be that way. But he can acknowledge, okay, Jim wants to go next, and he'll move it on and direct the conversation. So if a problem arises in terms of procedure, you can create rules, regulations that you could follow. Some towns have felt that technology has become, it interferes, so they preclude cell phones, so you're not getting texts in the middle of meetings. You can create rules around certain social aspects of running a meeting, so to ensure that it's open and the public is privy to what information you're looking at, and also just keeping things moving forward. So finally, we get to the open meeting law. And the quick pieces of open meeting law are quorum, deliberation, and jurisdiction. So quorum, you need a certain number of people in order to have a meeting. And that's in order to do business, but also in order to violate a meeting. So if you're in two and you're down the street at the local pub and you happen to talk shop, it's not an open meeting law violation because you're only in two. Mm-hmm. Similarly, if there's a quorum, you're all at a party together, you have to be discussing a matter within your jurisdiction. So you can talk about the Red Sox at the party, but you can't talk about the alcohol license that was before you the night before. So you can meet together, you just keep it off topic, off town business, and you should be good. And the final thing is deliberation. And this is the one that's not necessarily super intuitive and the one that people mostly run afoul of. And the reason you run afoul is because of email. So what happens is there's called serial communication. So you have someone who files a complaint and they hit to all the Board of Selectmen, I'm having this problem with XYZ. And someone responds all and says, we're gonna take care of this for you. I'm putting it on the agenda. This is horrible. You've got a problem there. You're acknowledging to your resident that you're being active, you're respecting them, you're being responsive, but you violated because you've talked about your thoughts on the matter. And that's not allowed under the open meeting law. So just hit reply. Or, don't respond at all, but just hit reply. The key is don't hit reply all. It's a common problem. The other common problem is serial communication, when one person, Laura, writes to Kenny, and Kenny writes to Jim, and then it goes around in the circle to a quorum, and that's when you also run afoul of the open meeting law. Those are the common
Not
occurrences.
just writing, this could be phone call. I call Kenny, who then calls Matt, who
That's
then
right.
calls.
Phone calls are less easy to find. You
Right.
can't document it, so it's based on testimony. It would be more difficult to prove. But right, absolutely, under the open meeting law, any sort of serial communication, oral, written, or otherwise, would be a violation. And that's really the gist of it. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Like a ton.
Okay, good. Hit me, Jim.
Well, the first one there with the open meeting law. And it could be on any subject that, let's say, we're going into a meeting that I'm not really sure how I want to vote. I call Kenny and talk to Kenny.
Yep.
And Kenny has already called Laura and spoke to Laura about the situation. So if Kenny tells me what Laura said to him, we have an open meeting law violation.
It's called super big trouble. Yes.
Okay.
You can't do that because why is that? So what the open meeting law contemplates is that the folks at home or the folks sitting in this room understand how you got from the point of, I don't know how I'm going to vote on this, to the point of I'm voting yes or I'm voting no. They want to understand what led you to that position. So if Laura's discussion with Kenny had an influence on you, it's their right to know that that exchange occurred. So they want to say, why the heck are these guys voting this way? There might be a really great reason. It might be a project that the public is completely opposed to, but Laura brought up this ingenious point that made you think, you know what, actually, these guys just don't know it. And you bring them into the conversation.
A good question.
Yeah,
You have more?
I do, but I thought somebody else might have.
I think that's a real pitfall for the unwary, that one right there.
It's
Yeah.
super hard, and you're being well-meaning because you're trying to inform yourself
Well,
before you get here.
And that's my point, Kate, is let's say, I'm not sure, I talked to Kenny, but Laura found something somewhere and pointed that out to Kenny, and all Kenny did was tell me, so I went to where Laura went, found the information, read it, and I based my vote or my opinion on the information that I found.
Yep.
But if, I mean, I guess I could have called Laura directly, because it would have been okay for me to call Kenny and then call Laura. 'Cause,
Provided you're not providing
Laura,
them
I told
both
you.
with the same information though, too. Because if you were to say to Kenny, I'm voting this because of X, Y, Z, and then you were to separately call Laura to say, I'm voting this way because of X, Y, Z, that would still be a violation because now they're privy to your thoughts.
Okay.
See?
But if I just, if I wasn't sure how I wanted to vote,
And just having a discussion.
and, you know, then Laura told me that she found this information, she
Yeah.
searched it out, found it, and I read it, and I agreed with it, now I know how I'm voting.
Yep.
Yes, but don't we want Laura to present that in an open meeting where we all hear it
Why
at the
am I
same
the root of
time?
all evil in this example?
You're apparently a good researcher.
Basically, in a nutshell, you could only talk to one other selectman about whatever you
Yeah.
want to talk
Yeah.
to them
Yeah,
about.
essentially. And,
Okay.
you know, I mean, to be fair, the Division of Open Government would prefer you talk to no one about what your thoughts were, you know what I mean?
Okay.
But it's just not a violation when it's not a quorum, because it's not a meeting.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right. Laura, if she has great information, should be mindful of that this might be helpful to everyone else, so I'm gonna bring it, and I'm gonna bring copies, or I'm gonna give copies to Mary to put on to your electronic equipment.
Now, could I do a FYI? No, don't reply to me, just FYI in preparation for the meeting. This is just a hypothetical.
So you can submit to everyone materials, certain materials, right? But this one is also super tricky, and there was actually a recent case that came out about this particular issue. And I'm blanking on the name, but anyway, it was about town manager evaluation. So you can distribute information, but you can't put any of your opinions in that information.
Wasn't this the one where they collected the
Yes.
votes and put it all together, and that was considered a deliberation?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they all did individual evaluations. They gave them to the chairman. The chairman compiled them into a single document, and then that document, I think, was also distributed. And the Division of Open Government actually found that it wasn't a violation, and then it was taken to Superior Court, and I think it went. I don't know where it went.
And that was local too, because I remember.
Yes, it was in Massachusetts, because MMA
Oh, yeah.
wrote about
I
it.
mean, it was
Yeah.
local in terms of the South Shore, I think.
Yes, I think it was.
Yeah, I think it
It
was.
was Easton for some reason.
I want to say it was like Booten. It's some B word is the plaintiff. But regardless, the court disagreed with the Division of Open Government and found that it was a violation, even though it was really just distributing materials to some degree. But because it contained each person's individual opinion, it essentially amounted to a deliberation, because everyone understood, okay, Matt disliked the town administrator. Jim loved him, So everyone knew what everyone's position was
Yeah.
before they had the meeting. So that's when you have to be careful about distributing information. If you find an article,
That's what I was thinking.
this may be helpful. You should be good.
Why wouldn't I just, though, send it to Mike and
Mike,
Mary then?
yeah, that's
Just
probably
forget the
the
Board of
best way.
Selectmen.
Cleaner.
Yeah.
Just send
It's cleaner,
I
and then
do.
it goes,
Yeah.
it
I
can
don't
go
send
in
the
the
board
package.
emails collectively, so if there's information I want them to get, Mike or Mary
Yeah.
will send it out.
And it's a really great practice to do that, because the risk is someone hits reply all, oh my, I've changed my position,
Right.
And so you run into that situation.
Good. Does anybody else have any more
I do.
questions? All right, go ahead.
Which was a great segue to evaluate the town administrator.
Yes.
Shortly after Laura and I got on, we had to do an evaluation on you, Mike, and obviously I wasn't prepared. Then Wes and Matt came on, and it was the same thing. We've since changed that.
Okay.
And with Mike being in charge of all the employees, it's very easy for Mike to do an evaluation of the employees for the town.
Yes, he has exposure.
Where, and I can only speak for me, where I'm here every Tuesday night for a couple of hours. Maybe I see Mike 2 or 3 times a week for a half hour, a couple of phone calls. It makes it very difficult for me, I think, to give him a proper evaluation. So what do you think, Kate, would be the best way to, I mean, I've had my thoughts on it, and I would like to talk to, without names, but as many, or at least the department heads, to find out what their feedback is, and go that way, so that I could give Mike a proper evaluation.
Yeah, so there are several things that you can do. You can talk to the department heads. You can talk to employees. You can do all of those things. You set goals, right, when you're doing your evaluation. You set goals, and the question is, did he meet those goals? So the risk is, and I'm not saying this would necessarily happen, but you'd never want to rely solely on other people's accounts, because there could be reasons that someone's given a bad evaluation of their boss because maybe Mike is following up with things a lot and ensuring things are done, and it's irritating to that person. So that person has a reason not to give Mike a good evaluation from his or her perspective, and it may unduly taint things. But that said, it is a tool that people use, because oftentimes there's some constructive criticism that could come out of those kind of discussions. You can have different metrics. So when you're setting your goal, have different metrics that you have to meet, aside from goals. Did Mike do this goal well? 1 through 5 or whatever. I'm not sure how your evaluation looks, and I don't want to deviate too much on this topic, but there are a whole host of things that you can do, provided they're also they comport with his contract. So you have to look back at the contract too and see what it says, and I frankly don't know what it says.
I like the idea of the department head thing. At where I work, we do what's called the 360, which is we send out questionnaires similar to what we're going to be filling out to peers of ours and people that we work with, and then we get, in this case, we'd have all of that combined with what we put together, and it would give us a holistic view of overall, how is Mike doing with the people he manages, with us, with, so we can maybe talk about that, I don't know, in another meeting, but.
Well, we can't because we'd be breaking an
Well,
open
no,
meeting law.
we just asked Kenny to put it on the agenda, and then we're good, we can deliberate to our heart's content.
But yeah, exactly. You can put that on an agenda. There are a lot of creative ways to deal with that, for sure. And in terms of just circling back to the open meeting law too, and I don't want to leave this point before I forget, you can, because if you had to do all of that reading in the middle of a meeting, it can be cumbersome, right? So when you're dealing with opinion information, what they've said is you can simultaneously publish those evaluations at the same time you distribute to the board. So you wouldn't want to sit in the middle of a meeting and look through 20 pages of documents that you couldn't get in advance, but you could distribute them in advance so that you're well prepared for the meeting, provided you publish them on the web. So that's an alternative too.
I missed that.
So-
We're talking specifically about evaluations?
On evaluations particularly.
Okay.
So, and that's what that case stood for, that proposition, because the court recognized that it would be really kind of untenable to have the meeting go like this and have people sit there reading silently for 25 minutes. It would
That's
just
true,
be
but isn't it
a
super
waste of
awkward
time.
to have somebody's review put out publicly
That's
before
why-
anybody's having a conversation with the
That's
person
why
about
other
it?
folks don't want
Yeah.
to do
Yeah, I
that.
wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
So
do that.
it's sort of a catch-22, but it's the nature of being a public body. It's not a great position to be in terms of protecting people's privacy and being respectful of them. And frankly, in my mind, they're not caring about this in the open meeting law, but in my mind, having an open discussion about some constructive criticism. Because then you really don't want to criticize in any way,
Right.
even if it's something that could be rectified. But the Division of Open Government doesn't care about the practical pieces of that problem. So,
Good, Jim.
Oh, I got more questions.
Yeah, good.
Okay, then. You had mentioned about the chairman putting together the agenda,
yep,
which I didn't know in my first year, almost all the way through it, that to get something on the agenda, and Matt and Wes may or may not know this, but it wasn't in the handout, just giving the chairman a simple call or an email asking for something to be put on the agenda.
yep.
Either get it on the agenda or at least get a phone call back, which I didn't know when I first joined, or first sat on this side of the table. But I think that's important that, that it's out there that any selectman could get something on the agenda. And even if it was brought to them by a citizen or 10 citizens, they could represent that group and get it on the agenda, where the citizens wouldn't have to, go through all the stuff. I just wanted to.
Well, Mary was gonna start asking us in advance, vis-à-vis through Kenny, do you guys have anything you wanna have on the agenda? Then we would just email it back to her and Kenny and
Right.
tell. So if we don't think, to do it, they'd be asking so that, oh yeah, that's right, somebody asked me about such and such, and we could,
Right, and I think I've already done that, and
Yeah.
and it's been on the agenda.
I
Yeah.
think we just really started that a couple
Yeah.
months ago.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
And then Mary was out last
Yeah.
week, so
So that,
moving forward, that's what we're
Yeah.
gonna do.
and the other piece of that, you're a really cooperative board with one another, so it's never a problem. But here's a problem that you might face as the chairman. You may say, if Jim has something that he wants on the agenda, you may say, I'm sorry, we can't do it this month because you realized it's quite a full agenda. I mean, I've seen other boards, they just refuse to put it on the agenda for whatever purpose.
And what's the recourse there?
So
It gets ugly.
it gets ugly. Yeah. So, I mean, you could go off on that. There are votes of no confidence. There are all kinds of things that you could get into, and it gets ugly. But that wouldn't be a situation here, but I could foresee Kenny saying, you know what, we're only dealing with town meeting warrant stuff tonight. We're not going to deal with, I don't know, a fire hydrant issue or something like that.
Yeah, but that's really, I mean, in my mind, if it's not a personal thing, but it's merely like a time management, like we have to focus on this, we've got to manage the time, like that's totally understandable, and it's his role.
Yep.
To keep us on point and keep us moving along. But I do know what you're saying. It could deteriorate to very personal politics. And,
Yeah.
In a neighboring town.
Yes, like for instance, that type of situation, which is hard to envision.
So
here in Hanson.
if a resident has a question or wants to put something on the agenda, if I don't feel it needs to be there, it's my opinion, I'm not gonna put it on there.
It's true. You have the power of the
'Cause
chair.
within the past year, we've had a couple, and I'm not gonna mention them, we've had a couple of situations where it was something, in my opinion, that I didn't think should have been in front of the selectmen. It should have been handled by other department.
Yeah.
It was on the agenda, and we discussed it. It was my opinion that it just shouldn't have been there. So if that same situation came up as I'm chair, I wouldn't put that on the agenda.
Yeah.
I would advise them to go to the proper department where I felt that it should be handled.
That's absolutely permissible and appropriate. And, if you don't have jurisdiction over a matter, there's not much you can do about it. If they have to go to Conservation Commission, that's where they have to go.
Yeah, and that gives a real mixed message because, if we're appointing, say, in your example, the conservation, but then we're allowing somebody to come here and sort of do an end run around conservation, then are we really empowering the people that we've appointed? And, I know what I would feel like if I were in that role, and it wouldn't be real good, to think somebody's going to constantly doing end runs. So I think it's more efficient for us. It's, it's people staying in their swim lanes and doing what they're good at, because we're not conservation.
That's right.
We haven't studied all of that. We've got a different, level of expertise. So I think you're totally 100% right, Kenny. Like there are things that we just
Just some
we,
things
we
you
can
just-
be the traffic controller and say you probably
Right.
need to talk to so-and-so. You
And
probably
then
need to,
sometimes there's
Yeah.
other things too that doesn't really necessarily need to be out in public.
yes.
Before I was a selectman, I didn't realize what actually went on in town hall, and most people don't know the ins and outs and what actually goes on. So there's certain things that it's not going to benefit the town if it's out there.
And
And now
could
you can't unknow it.
It could expose the town to liability. There are
Yes.
certain things
Yeah.
that are required to stay private.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and what you have to do in your response to whatever resident or person is approaching you is try to explain that, offline. Can't do that here. This isn't the forum. So,
Excellent. Jim? I know you got more questions.
I do. Kate, I'm really sorry, but, okay, let's just say hypothetically, I'm somewhere in town.
Can you not use Laura, use me?
Move on down the line here.
And I see an employee that I feel is not doing their job properly.
yeah.
I know you kind of skimmed over it. As my function as a selectman, I mean, I'm also a citizen.
Yeah.
And I pay their salaries. So where do I go from there?
Mike is the personnel.
Yeah.
That's the answer to that.
You speak to, if it's something so egregious that you feel needs town action, you go to Mike.
Okay.
If it's something like, hey buddy, you've been in your car for 45 minutes and I know your break is only half an hour, quit it. You're a resident. I'm not saying that you're foreclosed from being responsive, but if it's something that you think warrants discipline, warrants a reaction by the town, then you go absolutely through Mike. If it's you wanting someone to take official action, you go to Mike. You know, I know that, and I'm trying to think of an example. I see a violation of wetlands.
Yes, that's a great example.
You know, how come who do you have here? A wetlands officer? What do you have?
Conservation, Matt Tanis.
Conservation officer. Matt, I apologize.
Yeah.
If you go, it needs enforcement. You don't go to Matt and say property XYZ needs enforcement. You go to Mike, and Mike goes to Matt, because Mike may have more information than you do.
Okay.
Maybe there's already been an approval. Maybe the application's filed. Maybe they got an enforcement order already, and they're filing a notice of intent. You know, so anytime you want the town to react officially and do something or respond, you go to Mike. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
That's all I have, because I wrote down, that's what I kind of thought it would be, a one-on-one with the TA.
I gotta tell you,
Yeah.
all your questions were good.
They were really good.
Makes me think I should have did this a year ago.
Okay.
They
well
were
then-
here in the making.
All right, can I ask one more?
And one other response. Anytime you see a town employee doing something great, you always say, "Great job."
Okay. I can do that. Okay.
It doesn't always have to be bad, right?
Right.
No, you know what?
You don't have to go through Mike for that.
I'm done. I think I'm going to save my other
Promise?
question for a one-on-one with the TA.
Okay.
And then go from there.
Okay.
So,
Cliffhanger.
yeah.
Matt, do you have any questions?
No, sir.
No? Mr. Bloss is good?
I thank
All right.
I thank you guys for doing this.
Yeah.
It's great.
It
Yeah.
was really her and talking, and
Yep.
she just, it wasn't me. I can't take the credit.
Matt made a good point at our previous meeting
Yeah.
about social media.
Oh,
Which
yes.
was just excellent, and I think maybe we should discuss it. He did
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
Commenting on social media together.
Yeah. So this is such a huge gray area. And there's no real great answer. But there is a risk that when you're Facebooking or Twittering or
Tweeting,
tweeting,
Instagram.
don't do any of it. There is a risk that that could be seen as serial deliberation. But it is, especially in what are they called, closed forums. So if you have a page that people subscribe to and it's not necessarily public. Now, some people could argue that if it's a public page, so any person can go in and do a few clicks and get into that page, it would be open enough such that it wouldn't constitute an open meeting law violation. But as far as I know, this is sort of uncharted territory. But more importantly than open meeting law, because I don't want to minimize it, it's super important, but especially if it's an application that's coming before this board, say something super a hot topic like a marijuana establishment. And there's a lot of traffic on these websites about a marijuana establishment. And someone says, I'm not going to vote for that because I think XYZ. Well, then do you have a due process violation, right? Are you prejudging an application before it comes, before it gets to you? So you have a couple of competing things going on. So I think, and you want to be out there, right? You want to be, it's your job as a politician to talk about what your views on the issue. So I think it's a good idea to give political speech, to say I'm pro marijuana, or I'm anti marijuana, or I love the schools, or something like that.
Like
That's
a general position.
general
not-
position on policy matters. But and it's better to be in a public forum, but don't start responding to people's comments. It also can devolve really
yes.
quickly. So it's but it's something to be careful about, and it's something that's certainly going to be tested in the future to determine if those kinds of comments are open meeting law violations. So be mindful, be general, and obviously always be polite.
So it would have to relate to town business though, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if Laura posts something and says, I'm having a bake sale on Saturday, and Wes hops on and says, oh yeah, her brownies are great, and Jim says, yeah, grab some chocolate cake while you're there.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Cookies with marijuana.
Baking
right?
brownies, making cereal phone calls.
But yeah. No, those are really great points. And social media, you can get into other pitfalls of social media because so you never want to obviously cross those lines of being, using slurs or those kinds of things. Even if you think you're being funny, this is not a world where that flies, and that could be grounds for serious reactions against you folks. And obviously, we have a policy in place for all our employees with respect to that. So it's important to be really mindful. It's easy to get behind that computer and respond, especially when it's something that you're really passionate about. But it's always important to be really mindful of what you're saying.
I think if you stick to the facts, and you're not giving an opinion, you're just, sharing information, I think it's a bit unseemly almost to take to Facebook and try to get people over to your position and all that. I don't know, it makes me feel uncomfortable, and I don't think it's the right forum for selectmen. But I'm just one person, but I don't think that anybody here really.
No,
I'm not aware of
Facebook
anybody.
works for me because that's why I
Yeah.
don't have one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's great. I love it.
that's true. I should have been born in the
that's
1950s.
great.
I'm not.
I don't care what your kids are doing, what your dog's doing. I don't care.
It's cold, Kenny.
So thank you, Kate. We
right.
really
Thank you.
appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, no,
All
thank
right,
you.
and I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Carol, thank you, and thank you, Tracy, for attending. All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Good night.